How did your dad lose his custody right? He showed up drunk to my 7th birthday party, got into a screaming match with my mom in front of all my friends, then tried to drive away with me in the car while he was still intoxicated, which was the final straw that convinced the judge he was unfit to be alone with his own child. My parents had been divorced for 2 years, and Dad was supposed to have me every other weekend. Most of the time he'd cancel at the last minute, claiming he had to work or wasn't feeling well, but I always knew it was because he'd been drinking. My birthday party was at Chuck E. Cheese, and I'd been excited for weeks because Dad promised he'd actually show up this time. He'd missed my last 2 birthdays, and I really wanted him to meet my friends and see me blow out the candles. Dad arrived an hour late, stumbling through the door and reeking of alcohol. My mom's face went white when she saw him, but she tried to stay calm for my sake. I was just happy he came, even though he was acting weird and talking too loud. Things went downhill fast when Dad started arguing with my mom about the custody schedule. He was slurring his words and getting aggressive, insisting that she was keeping me away from him on purpose. My friends' parents started looking uncomfortable and gathering their kids. The worst part was watching my friends' faces as they realized something was very wrong with my dad. Tommy's mom whispered something to her husband and started packing up their stuff early. Sarah looked scared and asked her dad if they could leave. The breaking point came when it was time to cut the cake. Dad grabbed my arm and announced loudly that we were leaving early so he could take me to a real celebration at his apartment. My mom tried to reason with him, explaining that the party wasn't over and my friends were still there. Dad completely lost it, screaming that my mom was a controlling witch who was trying to turn me against him. He was so drunk he could barely stand straight, but he kept insisting he was fine and had every right to take his son wherever he wanted. When my mom refused to let me leave with him, Dad grabbed my wrist and started dragging me toward the exit. I was crying and scared, begging him to stop because he was hurting me. The other parents were calling the police while my mom followed us, pleading with Dad to let me go. Dad managed to get me to his car and was fumbling with his keys when the cops arrived. He tried to start the engine while I was crying in the passenger seat, telling him I wanted to go back to my party. The officers had to physically remove him from the driver's seat. I'll never forget watching my dad get handcuffed in the Chuck E. Cheese parking lot while my birthday cake sat melting on the table inside. All my friends saw everything, and I was humiliated and heartbroken. 2 weeks later, the judge terminated Dad's unsupervised visitation rights. He could only see me with a court-appointed supervisor present, and only if he completed an alcohol treatment program. He never did. The supervised visits lasted about 6 months before Dad stopped showing up altogether. I waited in that sterile room every other Saturday for 3 weeks before my mom finally told me he wasn't coming anymore. I spent years blaming myself, thinking if I'd been a better kid or if I hadn't cried so much that night, maybe Dad would have gotten help and we could have had a normal relationship. It took therapy to understand that his addiction wasn't my fault. The hardest part wasn't even losing him that night. It was realizing that alcohol had always been more important to him than I was. Every missed weekend, every broken promise, every time he chose the bottle over showing up for his son.